We know relationships can be a key to living a meaningful life. However, for many, relationships can be messy, complex, and disorganized. Today, I'm speaking with someone who understands the hidden forces that can make or break most of our important connections. Welcome back to the You Potential podcast. I'm your host, Sean Maslick. Today, I'm joined by Debra Kaplan, therapist specializing in sexual addiction, trauma, and relationships. She's transitioned from Wall Street to help couples battle the titans of money, sex, and power. We're exploring why power differentials in relationships are normal, but it's how we navigate them that makes all the difference. Debra shares how these three forces may be secretly impacting your relationships, why connection often feels so elusive, and practical ways to move from power struggles to genuine intimacy and fulfillment. A note for the listeners: this conversation touches on sensitive topics, including trauma, addiction, and relationship dynamics that some may find challenging. Please seek professional support if you need it. And now I hope you enjoy this fascinating conversation with Debra Kaplan. Debra, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sean. Pleasure, and I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have a conversation with you about relationships, maybe some money, probably power, some conversations around sex within those conversations. But before, I thought we would get to know you, and we would start with the 1991 Geneva Peace Conference.
What would you like to know about that?
I would like to know, why was that a significant part of your story?
Yeah. At the time, it was referred to as the Geneva Peace Accords. It's now called the Peace Conferences. I was a commodity option trader on the floor of the CEC in New York before the towers came down. And I traded the softs, as they were called: coffee, sugar, cocoa, orange juice. And my exchange would close at around 2 p.m. in the afternoon, New York time. And the oil markets, which were all located, we were all located in, imagine a very big space without a divide. You can wander into one exchange and wander out of another, but there were no divides. So you had to know what trading pits you were watching or in or involved with. Anyway, at that time, Iraq had invaded Kuwait. And George H. Bush had sent James Baker to Geneva to speak with Tariq Aziz to withdraw the troops in the invasion of Kuwait. And no one at the time thought that it would not end. No one thought that it would end at an impasse. But at that time, I was trading the softs. I was not trading the oil complex. At the time, my then husband he was in the oil markets. That's not where I met him, though. And at around 2 o'clock, when my market closed, I was waiting, as were all traders around the world who traded oil, and diplomats and such and political appointees wanted to know the outcome of that meeting. And when James Baker stepped to the podium, the first words he uttered was regrettably. And with that, the oil markets went crazy. Traders flew from all corners. They were just kind of waiting. The markets were still waiting on this word and not imagining that the first word would be regrettably. And that began the first Gulf War. The markets went crazy. And it was in that moment that I was able to watch what was happening. And I was fascinated by the emotional drivers, those that were caught short or long, depending on which position they were holding. And it was in that moment that I knew, I didn't know how, but I knew at some point down the road that I wanted to understand money, but emotions and what drives people's behavior and beliefs around money and work. And I was just fascinated. And that is what set it off.
There are so many interesting points in that answer. I'm curious, with many years of insight now, back in 1991, why do you think your reaction? Maybe this wasn't your initial reaction, but why was your reaction, what I'm hearing, curiosity to see what drives this money and emotions, as opposed to, which I can imagine, there was a lot of reactive behaviors driven by fear because, yeah, you get caught in one of these positions. That one word, you could be feeling, whew, life's going to be
I
feeling
had
tough.
long observed. So I was trading in the pits. I'm an option trader. I still trade today. I don't trade in the pits; they don't exist. But I still trade today. I am a multifaceted person, and so I do have a practice. I'm a therapist. I'm a
Yeah.
writer, a speaker, and I am still a trader.
Yeah. When you said it, your tone was like very proud. I'm a trader. I still trade.
I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
That is, there were very few women on the floor, probably a 1 to 1,000, 1 to 100 women at any given time, other than women who were runners or clerks or something. But there are very few women traders on the floor. Anyway, when trading, you have as a trader the sense of when someone's trying to unload a position or gather a position, it is very much about reading people's emotions, reading their body language, understanding, I'm not going to say the psychology of it, but it's the micro expressions of what's going on. So I'm not just looking at numbers. I'm not just looking at models. And when I say models, I'm talking about, modeling for risk and such for the Greeks. I'm watching, what is this person doing? So I've always been driven by and curious about people. It, in that context, was trading. So in the moment when the Geneva Peace Accords broke and James Baker stepped to the podium, I was so taken by the emotions and the underlying drivers of people's belief and actions in that moment that I realized the day will come that I'm no longer on this floor. And that day will be when I'm more interested in people, and I don't know how, I don't know where, I don't know in what context, but I will be looking at and involved with psychology and people's emotions.
It's interesting how you say I was so taken by their emotions, because I imagine you're human. You had your own emotions, but yet this level of curiosity you speak is so taken that it allowed you to, yeah, really observe and witness the power, the force that, going back to that word, regrettably has on these individuals.
Yeah, I mean, think about an event, but more so, it was on the word that set off the oil markets and set off the world chaos and that war. Now, in truth, my then husband was trading and he had a position. There's a chapter in the book for Love and Money. It's called The House That Saddam Built. We were on, I can't say we, I'm not even going to take any credit for it. He had a position where he had a position that benefited from the outcome. No one knows what the outcome is. So perhaps I wasn't as in a fear place that I was thinking, what's going to happen? My God. And I don't follow at the time. I didn't follow what his positions were. We talked trade. We talked the business. We talked the markets, as we referred to them. But I wasn't sitting there thinking, what's his position? What's his position? What's his position? That wasn't even anywhere in my mind. It was, what is going on here? I can tell just by reading what's going on, where they are, what kind of position they're holding. I mean, that's just a shit ton of stuff up here that blew me away. And I'm like, I want that. I want to dwell in that world more.
Dwell in that world more. I want to get back to late 80s and you working in the pit of Wall Street. But before we go there, that you want to dwell and be in there more. It makes me think of a part in your book where you talk about watching your parents from the back seat of your Chevy DeSoto, where you're really learning about relationships and observing how relationships work. How much, if any at all, does this all go back to whether it's the back seat of that car or just being a child and being around your parents and other people in relationships?
It very much comes full circle. All of our lives, we have threads of experiences, templates that are filled of people, places, and things, and sensorial input, external, internal. So all of us collect an experience as we move along and commute forward some past maybe unacknowledged experiences. But I played a very, and what you're referencing from the back seat of our family car. I am a middle child, and I often sat in the middle of the back seat for no particular reason. But if there were three of us back there, I often occupied the middle, probably more because my brother and my sister would bicker and I sat in the middle and separated them, not because I chose to, but because maybe it was I was told to sit there. Regardless, it gave me a literal and figurative view into the front seat. And while my sister and brother are off doing whatever they're doing, I'm watching my parents and I'm watching the dynamics between them. I'm listening to their conversations because adult conversations are sometimes fascinating as a kid. And I certainly was keen into, but more aware of what was happening, not what they were talking about, which really kind of started the process of, not the content of how couples argue or how conflicts are resolved. It isn't always content. It is often process. And I tell that to couples today in my office. I want to address what is happening between you. What are you feeling? What are you noticing in your body? When Joe over here raises his eyes or widens his eyes, what does that do for you here, Susie or Frank or whatever? So I was really observant of their process and what was going on for my mother, because I had a lot of power in our family. And that too factors into ultimately writing about this. I was my father's spouse and my mother's mother. Now, no, there was no sex between my father and I, but I was his emotional go-to. I was emotionally enmeshed by him. And my mom, who kind of opted out of the marriage, I was her mother. She'd come to me, and when she got lost in that DeSoto, because at the time there were push button transmission and the buttons would fall through the dash. So whatever gear we were in, we were stuck. And my mother had a horrible sense of direction. So she couldn't reverse if we were in forward. And that was terrifying. So I would sit hanging over the seat, no seatbelts back then, and I would sit hanging over the seat going, well, Mom, like Dad always says, just when you hit water, stop. I mean, think of what the child is saying. Like, just utter anything to calm this person who's driving this car that is now out of control because she's enraged and she's kind of just going crazy around, having gotten lost, not knowing what to do that she's lost. And so I'm trying to calm her down and also bring some level of comfort to her. And I'm a child. So I learned a lot of things in that experience, and it was all brought forward when I became a therapist and couples started coming into the office and they'd argue about sex. But then they'd really start arguing about money. I could ramble on and tell you how those two came together, but I'll take a pause here. Let you ask any questions if you want.
You know what? I'm curious about that last point you made.
Yeah. I am a faculty member for an international institute that trains therapists in trauma and addiction. And as a faculty member in the certification, part of what I train therapists in is neurobiology of addiction, and we work primarily around the realm of sex addiction. Of course, the multiple addictions come in and play. There's the constellation. Someone could have problems with alcohol, but their real problem is work. Some people have a problem with gambling, but they also have a problem with game addiction, right? There's a lot of intersection between addictions and a lot of cross addictions. As I was training at the time before COVID, a lot of our trainings were in person. I was actually presenting at a invitation training at a corporation, and I was with the founder of the institute. And he said to me, you have a book to write. And I said, well, I am a writer. I've been writing since I'm 16, published since I'm 16. But what do you mean? What are you referencing? And he said, well, you've worked on Wall Street. I'm sure there's plenty there. And I said, in what way are you imagining? And he said, well, we talk a lot about sex addiction, that it is a disentangling of sex as a byproduct of a healthy relationship. And emotion is parsed from the sex. And he said, I'm sure that Wall Street has its own stories to tell. And I went, oh, Dr. Carnes, like, you have no idea how many stories I have to tell. I'm a keeper of a lot of stories that may never get told. And as I sat and thought about it, I realized sex, money, and power, because everyone on Wall Street was bought one way or another. It's just what's your price? And I refused to sell out, but I was aware of the power of money. In that day in 1991, I was aware of the power of words. And I thought much had been written about sex, much is written about money, but really no one brought money and sex together. And then when you factor in the power aspect of the process of watching my parents fight and how the influence of the person who opts out, the passive one, is not the person who is loud and noisy. They're not always, unless there's abject abuse, but absence of that, the person who's quiet really pulls the strings. They hold the power. And I learned a lot, and that is how it all came together.
So you say the quiet one, the passive one, really holds the string. Can you holds the power. Can you explain more? And people might be thinking, or I'm thinking too, sometimes the loud one is like loud and can cause confrontation. So perhaps the quiet one might just want to quiet that down and just go with,
on very simplistic terms, let's go back to the middle seat in the DeSoto. I'm sitting there and I'm watching my parents, right? But I'm also getting bored. And, we're traveling along, and when are we going to be there? When are we going to get there? And if I decide to stir up trouble, I don't have to make a big noise about it. All I have to do is just figuratively or literally poke at my brother or poke at my sister or stir them up and get them going. Because remember, I'm learning from the best. I'm learning from two adults who are activating each other in an argument, and I get to employ this as a child. So I stir up trouble. And then there's an upset or disruption or whatever, a dust up in the back seat. And who gets in trouble? The person who's making all the noise. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there quietly going, I didn't do anything. Now, of course, that's a child, right? And it's rather obnoxious in an adult form, but adults do this all the time. In couples where there is gaslighting, in couples where there's power dynamics and arguments, how do you maintain or co-opt some sense of power? Well, the person who feels powerless, whether that's inauthentically or because of their inability to, stand in their truth or their esteem, how to gain power when one feels like they don't have any is just fascinating. And couples have any manner of versions to that.
So you've already talked about these titans, the battle of titans, as you put in your third book, is it?
Yeah.
Third?
It was actually the second. It's actually my third book. There's an original book that not many people talk about. I have 4 books, but the book in this context, there are 3 that you're referencing.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's fourth. It's the third one, but it's really the second of the 3 that you're referencing.
So and sex, money, and power, and we're talking now specifically about relationships. And I thought it was interesting in the book how you talk about there will always be. I should watch my words. Maybe not always, but there are power differentials amongst relationships. And I'm bringing this up now is as you're talking about power differentials, people listening might think, oh my gosh, we have those in our relationship. Can you touch on how these power differentials, they exist? And I believe you talk about that they're not necessarily the problem. Rather, it's maybe the word you've been using is a process or how we navigate them.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm glad you're asking it, Sean, because look at the term, the expression power couple. That is not a negative, and nor is power imbalances always a negative. In fact, it's when it becomes problematic that a couple will come into an office or see a therapist. The term power couple means that two people bring some real strength, talent, accomplishment, achievement, or some sort of currency to that relationship. And together, what an amalgam, right? What a powerful presentation of two people who have arrived. Beyonce, Jay-Z. I mean, who goes first in that coupleship? Jay-Z,
Yeah.
Beyonce. They are both so amazingly talented and accomplished, right? When there's an imbalance in a relationship wherein there is not a belief shared by both partners that it is equal, there might be an age imbalance. There may be a education imbalance. There might be an income imbalance. There might be a family or friendship or social entree imbalance. We could go on. If two people come together and are saying, well, hey, you've got the education and you've got the better chance of a higher paying job, and therefore we can have a much more comfortable lifestyle, then you're the one who goes to work and I'll stay home with the kids, regardless of whatever gender or whatever kind of coupleship this is. That's a shared balance of what one does well and brings to the coupleship. If there is, however, an imbalance wherein age is used in a exploitive fashion, or sex is used in an exploitive nature, abusive or other, where that balance or that imbalance is not shared nor appreciated, and in fact very problematic and conflicted, that is what will bring a couple into the office. They may not know, however, that the issue here, which is that imbalance. I've worked with couples in the past where there is a major age difference, 18 years, 15 years. Okay, in the middle years, that's probably not an issue. But early on in life, think about that. Mm-hmm. You get a 20-year-old and you get a 35-year-old. That is a very big difference of life, of exposure to life, of intellect, of capability, earning power. And so that might be problematic at that time. However, it evens out in the middle years. Now go to the back end of that lifeline, and you've got someone who's 70 and someone who's 85. Now you have vigor, you have ability, you have physical capacity. So the imbalances really have to be addressed. And when it's exploitive or abusive and it involves sex and money, that power differential can be very problematic.
And when you use the word exploited, whether it's money, whether it's sex, whether it's power, can you touch on like what is exploited? And because I ask this because some people are like, oh, I'm not exploiting. But I feel like perhaps you're not referring to this huge capital letters of exploiting.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how I don't know how, what's the word I'm looking for. And you may want to cut this out, but some of this material might be activating, maybe a bit triggering for some of your listeners or viewers. I work with couples wherein there may be addiction present in the relationship. The discovery of the betrayal, the discovery of the addiction, be it an affair, transactional sex, pornography viewing, producing, sharing, that creates a huge upset for any couple. However, what if that exploitation, that use of sex outside what the couple have determined is their rules of engagement? Now let's look at what happens to just the concepts of sex and money. So money is being used outside of the relationship in a way that one partner does not know this, to purchase sex, to pay for an affair partner, to pay for a lifestyle and or whatever behaviors they've been involved with. Sex itself may be exploitive if it's unprotected outside the marriage or the rules of the committed relationship. And now sex is being introduced in the relationship, but one of the partners is unaware that the other partner has been having sex and engaging in sexual behavior without protection. Well, that's pretty exploitive on so many levels, emotionally, physically, psychologically. So let's just start there. And it can get very triggering for some listening to this, because if you have viewers or listeners that are suspecting that there is any kind of problem going on, or that they are dealing with the aftermath of that problem, this can be very weighty, very hefty type of conversation that we're having.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Just as you opened up with the one word can cause an emotional reaction. And yes, this definitely can cause a reaction if some of this is someone's current state of being or past. Now, as you talk about this and these power differentials and seeking power here, whether it's in these exploitive manners or others, what's going on? like humans, we want connection. You know, ultimately, I feel like we don't want to hurt, but we know that the stories that you explain here, they're not one-offs. This is happening. You're the relationship therapist. I would assume this happens to some degree or another in many relationships. If humans, we desire connection, we desire to feel like a sense of belonging. Why do we do this?
It's a very good question. And if we as mere mortals could answer that question, those of us who are therapists, we treat the human condition. We don't always understand or know why the human condition is what it is. This podcast about well-being, your version of what is a well-lived life, a meaningful life, a potential life, may be very different. So if you and I both answer the question, do we both want a well-meaning and a well-lived life? Yes. How do we go about doing that? What that looks like, your pursuit, my pursuit, are driven by all of our earlier life experiences, the things we didn't get, the things we want more of. You know, as humans, we're pleasure-seeking and pain-avoiding. What we have also is a foundation based in how we were parented and nurtured. Yours and mine and everyone's earliest experiences with a caregiver set in place an attachment style. And so I may be very attracted to somebody who ultimately is not available emotionally. Maybe that is what I've learned from a parent who is, and not in my parents' case, but there are many clients who come into an office and they say, a family member, my father, my mother, my parent was alcoholic. So they were there, but not consistently. So I never knew when they were really going to be there. Well, that sets up a horrible pattern of, I want you when you're here, but inevitably I find people who are going to leave me. So we are working through, and often in a not so funny way, say we spend the rest of our life working through our childhoods. That causes a lot of pain. Or my trying to avoid pain and pleasure seeking inadvertently may cause you a lot of upset. I want to live a good life. I think we should go on vacation together. And so I've decided for the two of us that we're going to go take this Tiffany, top shelf level vacation. Aren't you excited, honey? No, you didn't run this by me. We agreed we would be saving for a car or for the next house we want to move into. We want to expand our family. Yes, honey, I know you want to expand. We're going to expand our family, and we're working on that. In fact, we can do that on vacation. Wouldn't that be a great idea? And so you can see where, for the benefit of both, one has decided for the two, and yet one is not on board because of any number of reasons. It defies what we've already agreed to. You're spending more than I want to spend. I don't agree we should spend it here in this way. I love you, but we all have needs and we all have wants, but we don't always have needs and wants that match up in the same way at the same time, that we are consciously or intentionally talking about.
Your example there, I find really, really insightful, because on the surface, it seems like it was just, a conversation. The individual who wants to go on the vacation could be, I was just excited. How come you're reacting like that? Yet, as you're talking about, our previous stories, our lived experiences create sensitivities around, in this case, I'm hearing some power differentials. At times, it seems like it could be so difficult to manage, because we're trying to manage our own inner selves and our own.
It is difficult, Sean.
Yeah.
Can
And
I actually
yeah.
bring up what you and I were talking about
Yeah.
before, if I might?
Yes.
I asked you if you're going to attend a conference that we both met at, and I've known you through, and the
Yeah.
associations of that. And you said I was, and I'm not, and then I was, and I'm not, and now I'm not. And look at the reasons why you chose to make the decision, right? And you're opting in for something. So an agreement to do this means that you cannot do that. You've chosen to make a decision based on some emotional need that is a higher value. It is a much more important pursuit and aspiration, because it fulfills some inner desire to connect in the ways and in with the people you're choosing to connect with. Both options give you connection, but the option you chose is more meaningful to you. And so you're going to say yes to that and no to another. Yes, you'll disappoint many other people. And those people may have their feelings like, oh man, I wish I could see you. Now, I'm not going to be at the conference. I would have wished I'd see you or not, but I'm not going to be there either because of a conflict. But let's say I was going. I'm disappointed, Sean. I'm not going to get a chance to see you. Yeah, you say, I understand and I appreciate it, because I would miss seeing you in person too, but I'm going to do this thing because it's meaningful to you. And so the greater yes has to come at a cost. And someone, not to their immediate injury, will have to live with those consequences.
You know what? Maybe it's the nature of your business, but as you reflect back, it got me thinking. I think 6 years. No, I'm pretty sure 6 years ago, 7. If the same situation happened, and I'm staying home as I talk to you, is because the Edmonton Oilers could win a Stanley Cup maybe, and I want to watch it with my kid and dad, and my wife and my daughter too. 7 years ago, this isn't about me, but I had a very shy upbringing. I was just shy. Just that's the way it was. And, I wanted to feel seen, heard, and validated. And I got that. My childhood was great, but I was shy. As my professional career started to, things happened, people noticed, it really filled me up with this sense of like, whoo, I'm being seen. People are taking notice. I had probably 14, no, maybe not 14, 12 people reach out if I was going to this conference. And the 7-year-old person would have just been like, whoa, wow, these people who like I hold up to here, this high regard, want me to come. Sorry, family. Hopefully the Oilers win one next year. But, it wasn't even a hard decision now.
Of course. And that is absolutely, it's a product of those 7 years of lived life, of experiences that you've had that may directly influence decisions you make in the future or now making today. I know when I lecture and train therapists, people say to me, Deb, you have a practice, you have a full-time practice, and you travel and you lecture. Now it's less travel in person to train because it's all virtual, which is really better. It's the cost benefit of that, right? You go to conferences, like you must be a workaholic. And I'm very proud, and I can say with absolute authenticity that I may work less than most people because I value and want a work-life balance. I know what it's like to work on Wall Street. I did it. And I know what it's like to commute, and I hated it. Commuting was just like, oh my God, if I'm doing this for the rest of my life, I'm out. But I work up until a certain point. For example, I don't like seeing clients in the evening. There's nothing wrong with starting later in the day and ending later. I don't want to be in my office, just psychologically, emotionally. I don't want to be in my office when it's dark at night. I want to either have finished a workout prepared or eaten a meal, either alone or with friends, and now just chilling. I don't want to be in my office. So I have determined where that line is. And I'm very clear for those that may not be so clear and they're trying to find their want or their need. I start with asking clients, do you know what a need is? And do you know what a want is? Because that's going to get you to a meaningful life. We know that you can amass massive amounts of money that you can't take with you, but you may feel safer existentially and of course, lifestyle and medically or whatever. But if you're really looking at what will make a fulfilled life, how will I live that life? It doesn't start years from now. It doesn't start days from now. It starts right where you are at every moment making those decisions as you did today and a different life lived 7 years ago. You have different needs that you had then. Your wants were different.
Thank you for that. When you talk about the understanding the needs and wants, which I think is a challenge to really, you talked about drawing a line in the sand, more about boundary, but drawing a line in the sand around what is a need and what is a want. How has that, if any at all, helped you embrace, live this meaningful life that you just spoke about?
Every day. It's an internalized process that I go through in just about all my affairs. And I don't mean affairs as in sexual, I mean in everything. I have to be careful when I say that as a therapist and a sex addiction therapist in all my affairs. When I decide to, for example, I was thrilled when you asked me to come on and talk with you. I'm not in the office right now. I'm not seeing a client right now. Does this, you're not paying me, I'm not paying you, there's no exchange of anything here. I wanted to do this. I was excited because I want to connect. I enjoyed meeting you. I enjoyed the first time we spoke. You do it well. You do your craft very well. And I was like, this is cool. There'll be a day when the Seans of the world are not asking to talk. And I'd be like, oh, I miss talking. I'm going to do this, right? There's not even a question because I'm really listening and focused on what feels right for me and not in a gluttonous sense. Like this chocolate cake feels right for me now and it'll feel right for me tomorrow. It's in the sense of what is fulfilling. That comes with age, certainly, and it comes with life experience, but it also comes with that I know who I am and I know who I'm not. And that is very, in that way, easy for me to calculate because it's not a hard process.
Well, I appreciate you giving your time to myself and the audience. Something that I really noticed when I spoke to you at FTA or other conversations and seen you speak is that you seem to hold this conviction that I could tell that you really enjoy what you're doing. You're assertive. You can command a room with a high level of compassion, though, like as you're talking. And I felt that was something that at times can be on two different ends of the spectrum, but you seem to hold both of those very well.
Thank you.
And
it comes from working hard and knowing myself. And I'm honored and I appreciate you sharing that because I think what you're witnessing or experiencing is my real true desire to connect with others. I don't stand behind a podium. That to me is a barrier between me and you, the audience. I don't stand behind a table or have to hide behind something because that stops. It's as if I put my hand over the camera. It's like I can't see you. I can't get to you, the client, you, the audience, or you, the person I'm in conversation with, because I really do want connection. And I think that's a result of all the therapy I've done and the recovery that I'm in and the work to want to be seen. I'm a middle child.
Me too, by the way.
And we're not seen often, but when I joke when I'm on stage, you're watching me now.
Yeah.
That is not lost on me. So I know who I am and I know who I'm not. But more than anything, I just love connecting to people and hearing their story and sharing time and space with them.
Good place to be. I might be stretching here, but I did say I want to go back to the late 80s when you went to Wall Street. where my thinking is going here, you're in the middle seat of that DeSoto. You're observing. You might be poking, being a little quiet, and poking your siblings. And then your father starts to, what I making an assumption here, trust you having these conversations. And this is around connection because you've been bringing up connection. So there's a level of connection there. I can imagine as you get older, it gets a little confusing to later, like, hey, why me? Why did we share so much with me? How much, if anything at all, did this desire for some connection, because I assume you were younger when you went to Wall Street, like going to Wall Street is like in pursuit of some level of connection, to be seen, to go work in this, not physically, this mentally, emotionally demanding place where not many females were doing what you did in the late 80s, not even today, even still.
Yeah. I think my desire and pursuit of finance on Wall Street. So I started as I started in commodities, physical commodities. I worked for what at the time was Fibro Solomon and Solomon Brothers. No one knows the name Solomon Brothers anymore. It's long gone. However, those people who know Michael Lewis, who is a literary muse of mine. I mean, this man can make numbers come alive, and you want someone who writes well, that man knows how to write. He shared time at Solomon Brothers. Did I know him? No, we were in different buildings, different silos of finance. That's where I started. And then I became a commodity option trader, but I worked also at Merrill Lynch. And I worked in junk bonds before I eventually migrated to commodities on the floor. I think what drives my interest, and at the time drove my interest to Wall Street, was that I am very powerful. And I'm not saying I walk around going like, I'm really powerful. I think I was falsely empowered by the experience with my dad. Now, there are pros and cons to all of our upbringing. And in that particular way, there are pros and cons to how my relationship with my dad elevated me. Remember, from the back seat of the car, I could really see right into the front seat of my parents' life, and was falsely empowered when I became my father's spouse and my mother's mother. That meant that I was his go-to confidant. I learned things that children shouldn't know about and or be leaned on for support in ways that a child shouldn't be leaned on who becomes an adult child. For whatever reason, and we don't have time at this podcast, but for whatever reason, that really empowered me, and I was not easily daunted. I liked finance. I always grew up thinking I wasn't very smart, but I liked finance, and I was like, okay, I'll go to Wall Street. But I knew I wasn't an excellent student. I didn't come from a pedigree school. I didn't know people. It isn't what you know, it's also who you know. I didn't know anyone. But I knocked on doors and I told them, you have no reason not to hire me because you can fire me if I don't produce. I don't come with a price on my head because I don't come by a headhunter or an executive search firm. So you're paying nothing for me. What have you got to lose? So I also know how to brand, to market. So I'm an entrepreneur, and I knew I had to sell myself because nobody could believe in me, and I had to let them know why they should. That all really kind of allowed my talents to come to full force. It wasn't easy, as you mentioned, because there are very few females, but I wasn't interested in hustling for approval, and I wrote that in For Love and Money. I wasn't interested in getting to sleeping my way to the top or getting anything that wasn't offered. And women have to work harder than men to get less money. I was there. I had nothing to prove except to do my job and to make sure that the person who hired me, that I do well for them. And then I eventually figured, you know what, I'm fed up working for other people, because when 1987 came and the stock market crash rolled around and everyone was summarily fired. And I, by the way, just as a side note, I don't know if in some of the pre-notes I wrote, the defining moment was really interesting. I got a job. One of the traders on the junk bond desk said, here, go talk to this guy. This is after 1987, Black Monday. And he said, go talk to this guy. He'll talk to you about giving a job. So I walk out of, I think we were at the time, one of the World Trade Centers. There are five, so they're smaller. I walked out of one and walked up to two or one, I can't remember which one it was, and up to the top of the World Trade Center. I had been up there as a child. I grew up in New York. We'd go up there to Windows of the World. We'd go to eat. We'd be around New York. But this was at an office. And so I walked out of the elevator. And Sean, I kid you not, I have been up at the top of the World Trade Center many, many times as a child, but walked out of the elevators, looked to my left out over the Hudson. And I said, wow, what the fuck do you do up here in a fire? Because you ain't getting out. And I'm not kidding. And then moved forward to go to the interview. In that interview, I decided right then and there, I don't want this job. It's not where I want to be ultimately. I thanked the man. I thanked him very much for the opportunity. And I said, what I think I want to do is go trade commodity options. And I shook his hand. He said, the job is here if you still want it, which was very gracious, but it wouldn't be. And I left. And that was Cantor Fitzgerald, who saw the greatest loss of life in 9/11 than any other firm. And as I wrote in the book, it's just not my time to die. Came down the elevator and pursued commodity option trading. And so I just have always had an inner sense of where I need and want to be. Some of it's wiring and some of it is also nurturing and my experiences growing up, for better or for worse. But I have to be authentic and true to me, because hustling for others' approval is of no interest to me. And that has its, that has its downside too. I don't always, in that regard, I play well in the sandbox with others, but I also, I don't play to the extent where I need you to like me. And sometimes that's necessary, making friends and connecting. So I've learned to soften a bit because I need to soften.
I got goosebumps when you told that story. It's not my time to die. Wow. I'm really curious. So, it sounds like a lot of, I don't know if the right word is emotional intelligence on how to use it when you need to. How do you think we untangled these patterns that we had as a kid? Because like I said, when parents overshare and enmesh us as a child into conversations that we're having, and we just want our parent to be okay. We just want them to be not upset, not to show emotion. So we tend to people please. As a result, we might go to Wall Street and just try to people please, try to get the money, try to get the attention of the men.
Right. Or pursue any career because we should versus we want to.
Yes. Yeah. As opposed to using it like you know when to put it. Sometimes you need to put it in place, but you can also back off and realize like, oh, no, this pattern is not what I want to do.
I think for most of us, as long as we are good with us and those around us are good, we go on being who we are.
Good with us. I like that.
I mean, if I'm obnoxious and I'm insulting to those around me and I don't care, but I start getting some pushback from those around me saying, Deb, like, what are you doing? And I value my friendship or our relationship. If I am interested and introspective, I will question like, whoa, what am I doing? Because I don't want to hurt anyone, because ultimately I do want to connect. And so I have to make sure that I'm in balance of who I am with who I also want to be in relationship with. I actually have a prime example, somewhat of an example. It's a little off topic, but it's related. I have a coupleship friend. They're two people, and one of them loves to play jokes. And so one partner plays jokes on the other. And occasionally, over the years when we first initially met, that partner would say to me, when Susie, not her real name, when Susie walks away, I want you to say da-da-da-da-da, pretend da-da-da-da-da. And I'd be like, really? And she'd say, yeah. We do this all the time. Okay. So I went along with it. And Susie would come back and Susie would be a little like, that's really funny. And I'm like, I don't get a sense Susie thinks it's so funny, but whatever. And I don't know, about a year went by and the same thing happened. And when Susie came back to the table, she looked devastated. Like I could see on her, Sean. She just like, I caused her pain because I was
Mm.
complicit and allowed to be a part of that. And the next time I saw them, I actually saw Susie in the parking lot of where we were. And I said to her, Susie, I want to apologize to you. I apologize to you. She goes, that's fine. It's fine. I went, no, hear me out, please. For you, it's fine. It's not fine for me. I did not like what I saw. I don't think it's funny. And I no longer will ever partake in any of that. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I agreed to play along with this thing. And it wasn't horrible. It was just, I don't know. It was just kind of wild that this couple does this. I'm not going to get into their head. And I thanked her and I said, I'm sorry and I'll never do that again because I saw the hurt I caused you and I don't want that to happen. And then to the other partner, I said, don't ever ask me again. You do what you do. Don't ever ask me again. I will not be a part of hurting you or Susie. And so about a week ago, that other partner said, oh, when you see this, I went, don't go there. Not going there. I'm out. I told you no is no. She was just, I went, I'm going to walk away if you keep persisting. So, it's like wanting to do no harm and to connect, not hurt. And if people don't get that pushback because it's not an internally driven and it has to come from an external place, and when it finally does, that person will either listen and change, get help, support, come to therapy, talk to people, or won't. And the difference is where their motivation and intention is on living a good life, a well-meaning life, or what does that mean to them?
Yeah. You write about in Battle of the Titans of, I forget the chapter title, but knowing your true self. I feel like that's part of this process of understanding, what is a meaningful life? What is connection to me?
Yes. For sure. For sure.
So when you see these dynamics, these titans, as you call it, money, sex, and power, it seems like it's about the power, and the money and sex is a way of getting the power in a relationship, or
Yes.
are they equally distributed?
No, I think that's a very interesting and good point you're making. Money and sex is often how to get the power. In a coupleship, partner A may use sex, and I don't care that we are in 2025, and I don't care that relationships come in all sizes, all shapes. Sex is still used as power. And it's interesting because in relationships where one makes the money or by way of an inheritance or even income has more money, that person, despite the fact that you would think on the surface has more power due to money, they are at times believing or feel falsely disempowered by way of sex. That's either being used exploitively or outside the relationship in an addiction or compulsive way, or in the relationship. I have had couples where one says, I don't contribute much to this relationship, but I certainly know I can be sexual. So if that's what I pay, if that's my contribution, and I know what it sounds like, and I don't care what year we're in, we're still guided as humans by what we know and what we grow up with. And I'm never in a position, and I use that word never, it is not, unless that person is truly on their way to hurting themselves and it requires that I intervene, I don't decide who and what people's values are. And as I tell clients, no one's coming to therapy to learn how to live life according to Deb Kaplan. I'm here to help you achieve your goals. And if your goal is to make this work, well, let's talk about why this dynamic isn't working. I may very nicely try to point out that you're trying to tolerate the intolerable. How is that possible? Or I may try to point out, if this is working for you, why are we here in this office talking about it? So there are many ways to help somebody change the perception and the vantage point of an issue that bothers them, seeing it from a different perspective gives them a new lens into or an awareness of what they're looking to change or maybe need to change but don't recognize what.
Your word choice of a different perception and perspective I thought was interesting. As we come to a close, because your time is valuable and I could talk to you all day, but if we're a couple listening or any relationship, I mean, this isn't just reserved for coupleships, it's any relationship.
True. Yeah.
If we're listening and recognizing that in some of our relationships, we have this power imbalance, which we've talked about, that's okay. It's the process of navigating it. If the goal is to come to a resolution, to be connected, is another thing we've been talking about. Can you specifically talk a bit more about this idea of perspective and perception? Because to me, that was really useful. It seems like it's not just digging into you did what, you did this. It's changing and reframing how we're looking at this.
Yeah. Let's use the example of this couple about one plays the joke on the other. When I put myself in Susie's shoes, I could now relate to what was happening on a very personal level, because that's empathy, right? That's mirror neurons. That's theory of mind. I'm stepping into your reality to get a sense of what that feels like. That's how to be relational. When I ask a client and a couple or individual, if your partner, if your boss, if your colleague, if your child, your mother, father, parent, whatever, were sitting here, what would they say? What might you think they would say about what we're talking about? I want to shift somebody out of their own subjective experience into seeing it through a different lens and or through somebody else's eyes, because that's how we connect.
Not always easy, but boy, can that work.
Very effective. The person has to be willing to say, I want to see it. Let me see what this issue or my statement or my behavior is through somebody else's experience, because that is how we stay connected. And conflicts are not resolved with trying to tug someone over to our, see it this way, and this is why you should. That doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. We are seeing this every day that it doesn't work. But if I can help get you into a place of just considering to take a different perspective, to walk in somebody else's shoes, that's a time-old statement. Now maybe I've changed and helped you see and take a new perspective and perception of an issue.
And it seems like anything can change when you do that.
It's the greatest motivation. And if the person truly wants to change, that is one of the ways to do it. But if someone is adamant about nope, that's a whole different approach. But it's a tougher road, because that doesn't really make for close connections.
Humans are fascinating, complex.
Aren't we?
Yeah,
we're messy.
We are, but it could be beautiful. There's many other topics that we could have explored. You're such an interesting and fascinating individual. Yeah, the dissociation. I was thinking about how we do that and distract ourselves is topics that we could further talk about, but we're at our time here. We've talked about a fair bit of things, and at one point you kind of stopped us and said, like, if this is triggering, you just want to take a second to recognize that. Is there anything that we talked about that you feel like you would just want to put a lid on or close a loop? Because I was kind of winding around a whole bunch of different angles, but just from your lens, if there's anything that you want to end on that we perhaps opened up that I haven't closed?
Nothing left open. Okay. On that prompt, do want to just remind the listener or the viewer that if you are experiencing or have doubt about what is happening in your relationship, or you're experiencing conflict, reach out for help. It feels unattainable because when we're in our own experience, we can't see above the hills. We can't see above what is blocking our view. Another person can help us do that. And it is very lonely to try to work through something by themselves. And so I really always invite the listener and or viewer that what we're talking about may have brought something to mind that was sitting in the way back consciousness and only now has been brought to it. And viewers contact me often in the past and in other podcasts and say, you brought something up I didn't recognize, but you were able to name it. And so if I've named something that has now been brought to your awareness and you want to change, reach out to me, to a professional who can help guide you.
Thank you for that. And we'll, of course, include your website, your contact information. Before you share your books, your website, my final question that we're asking everyone is, let's imagine now you're at end of life. It doesn't matter how old you are, but you're at end of life. You're sitting on a front porch, looking out at a view that brings you complete peace, ease, and contentment. You decide to write a letter to your children's children on what you learned was a key to live a meaningful life. What would be a message in that letter?
Whatever you do, love what you do and do it. Do it for you.
Thank you. Debra, I appreciate your time.
Thank you,
For
Sean.
listeners,
it's really been lovely.
It's always great to talk to you. For listeners who want to know about your books, your website, where can they find you on the World Wide Web?
I am at my name, DebraKaplanCounseling.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't do social media. They can find me there, but I don't do personal social media. So I'm on, I don't have an Instagram account. Sorry, people. I would have a follower. But I have a very wide digital footprint with my name associated on it. So all you have to do is plug it in. And I always reach out. So if I don't get your email, if I don't respond, it's because I didn't get an email or I didn't get a phone call or something.
And I really like your books, as I feel like it brings in a lot of practical experience. You're a good storyteller, sharing stories of yourself. You bring in research, and it's a nice blend. Sometimes I think books can be very narrative, which is great. Someone's story, that could be very academic and research focused. You seem to have a beautiful blend of all those. So
thank you.
I encourage listeners to read it because they are informative.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Thanks for watching this week's episode. If you enjoyed the chat, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.